The ink is dry, the house is quiet, and for the first time in years, the noise has stopped, and you are alone with your thoughts. Then comes a question no one prepares you for. Now what? I'm Trina, and today we're talking about how to stop living by default at the end of your marriage and start intentionally designing your new beginning. What happens when the ink is dry on your divorce papers? For me, I'm going to call it the trap of the Rebound project. So immediately after leaving the courthouse, we went directly to the passport office because I had accepted a position overseas, and my ex at the time had decided that he was not going to sign the passports for my children, who were obviously going to come with me overseas since my ex at the time was not in a position to care for them. So thankfully, I was awarded full physical and sole custody. So full physical and legal custody, sole legal custody of the children, and was able to take them overseas without him having to sign anything. And so I was able to get their passport. So I literally went from the courthouse to the passport office. And then within, I would say, a day or two, we were on a plane relocating overseas. And so the now what for me did not come immediately because I had new projects to think about, right? I had a new job, I had a new home, I had a new country I was living in, new culture I had to get used to. And I had to do all of this and also help my children adapt to their new surroundings as well. And even though my older son didn't come with us, he also was doing something new. He was starting college. So all of us were kind of in this new phase. And what it did was just take up tons of space, tons of time and energy. And it also delayed me really getting to my next step because I was not focused on that. I was avoiding the silence. I was busy. Like I said, I was learning a new language. I was learning how to function in this new role that I had, this new job. And so I didn't have any quiet time. I didn't have any downtime really because everything was new. And I'm not going to say that was all bad, but it definitely delayed me moving forward in terms of really becoming. And I don't think that is particular just to me. I know I have friends who you're in a relationship, it ends, you jump right into another relationship. So there's really no downtime. And we do that, I think, often because we don't really want to deal with the silence. We don't want to really want to deal with what just happened, not all the time. And so it's a coping mechanism, right? You you have other things that are now taking up your time, taking up your energy, taking up your attention, and you have not focused on and don't care to figure out what is going on. This major thing in your life that has just happened, you just want to get away from it. And like I said, I think it's a coping mechanism. I definitely employed it. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you stay in that season as long as I did, but I definitely, like I said, I had other things going on. I told myself I didn't have time to focus on my feelings or what had just happened because I wanted to again do well at my new job. I wanted to make sure my kids were adjusting to their new environment, et cetera, et cetera. And I wasn't going to deal with, or I didn't have time, or at least, like I said, I told myself I didn't have time to deal with how I was feeling about the divorce and what had just happened. What's required at this in between season is what I call it is really a different perspective on how we view it. So I viewed it as something I needed to fill up, when actually I came to realize this is really a sacred time. This is a time of preparation. You are getting ready to move from where you have been to where you're going, right? So you're not where you were, and you're thankful for that, and you understand that. But you also aren't where you want to be yet, right? So you are living kind of in this in between season. And what that looks like is functioning. You are absolutely functioning. You are showing up to work. You are showing up for your kids. If you have them, you are showing up for your friends. You are doing all the things, but there's something going on the inside, and you can't quite put your finger on it. You're not exactly sure what it is, but you don't feel settled. And that's a time, and that's a time that you are really your nervous system is trying to regulate itself, and you are in a time of preparation, and it's really a time for you to get to know yourself again and to get in tune with your feelings and your passions, your desires. But oftentimes, at least in my experience, I wasn't ready to go there. So, like I said, I tried to fill it up. I tried to fill the space with, new job, new people, new culture, new things to do, so that I'm not spending time with myself. I'm not having any quiet time. And it just prolongs me getting to the next step. My now what time, or my in between season, started when my children left for the summer to come back to the States to visit their dad. So it was about a year after the divorce. So for a year, I had really avoided having to deal with this in between season and having to deal with my own thoughts, my feelings about the divorce, all of that. But then I was forced to, because the house was extremely quiet with the younger ones gone. And I had a lot of downtime that I wasn't used to having. And so I had to start thinking about, okay, what is going on? What do I want the rest of my life to look like, really? I knew what I didn't want. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted everything to look like, but I was there to figure that out. And I had to start asking myself some questions about that. And that took some time to sort through my feelings. Took some time for me to reconnect with myself, because there was just so much that happened in the marriage where I had forgotten who I was and really had not been in touch with really what I wanted out of life, because I was so focused on keeping the peace and making sure everybody else's needs were taken care of. And so it did take me some time to sit with that. And it took me some time to kind of go over those things. And one of the things I will say is, even when I mentally understood what I needed to do, I still hadn't completely released a lot of the stress that I had and a lot of the guilt and the shame that I had from the divorce. And the thing about stress, and the thing about us as beings, is we are not just mental beings, but we are mind, body, and spirit beings. So if we don't let go of things, it will show up in our body. It will absolutely show up. And it can show up in a multitude of ways. Some of us, it shows up, we stop eating. Some of us, we eat too much. Some of us, we can't sleep. Some of us, all we do is sleep. So it just shows up. It shows up as exhaustion, it shows up as stress. And one of the ways it showed up kind of early on when I was in this season was physically, I was not able to raise my right hand. I was doing a workout and I couldn't even get my arm up. And I was like, what in the world? And I think it was just the stress that I was still holding on to and I hadn't released. And so this is really a time where we want to look at getting back to alignment, mind, body, and spirit alignment. And like I said, it is a process and it does take time, but these are things that are going to be happening during that in between season. Now, what's the difference between functioning and flowing? Okay. If you are like me, a high functioning female who is achieving and succeeding in most aspects of her life, except for this one thing, this marriage, you are probably, if you're in your in between season, wearing a high functioning mask. Again, because you are able to show up at work, show up as the fantastic mom that you are if you have kids, show up as that wonderful friend. You're able to still do all of that because you are a high functioning female and you are used to achieving and you're used to winning and you're used to succeeding. And so the issue that you are having and the issue that I had is that none of this failure at this marriage made sense because that's not who I was. I had the career that was just going great. I knew I was a wonderful mother. I was a great friend. I didn't understand how in the world I could have failed at this marriage when everything else in my life was succeeding. And that misalignment is really what caused all the issues because I was functioning perfectly fine on the outside while I was crumbling on the inside. It was a complete misalignment. And the thing about flowing, when we start flowing in life and not just functioning, we have alignment between our external showing and our internal truth. It's all aligned. And so that's where we want to go. That's where we're trying to get to. And when we're in this in-between season, that's our preparation time to get there. But it does require us to do some work. But those are the things that we have to deal with. Just recognize that we're misaligned and we got to get things back on track. One of the things that will help us get on track is to stop focusing on the things that we can't control. Now, I am speaking as a super control freak, okay? I absolutely like to control things. And I had to learn the hard way that this is something you cannot control. And actually, once you release control, that is going to definitely help your life flow much better. Okay. But there's things that we can't control. All right. So focus on those things that you can. You cannot control the fact that your ex sent you a text at 11 o'clock at night about something that you are not interested in having a conversation about. You can't control that. You can control whether or not you choose to respond to that text. And you also can control how you choose to respond to the text. Okay. But the fact that he sent it, you can't control that. Or she sent it, you can't control it. You cannot control court dates. You cannot control visitation requirements. You can't control any of that. What you can control is your response to it. You can control the atmosphere in your home. You can control that. So focus on those things that you can control and release all that stuff that you can't. You know, how you may have people in your life who are supportive as you're going through this process. You may have other people in your life that are not supportive. You cannot control how people respond to you. Okay. You can control whether or not you want to release some of the people in your life that are not being supportive, because again, that's something you can control. You don't have to give your time and energy to everyone who demands it. So if people are not being supportive of you, you might want to think about that. Okay. But get clear on what you can control and what you can't, and put your focus on the things that you can control and release everything else. Once I recognized that I was out of alignment, I was forced to just stop and deal with it. And though I had made the mental shift, and like I said, the body came a little bit later, one of the biggest things for me was really getting back to who I was, so reconnecting with myself, and also giving myself some grace and really practicing self-love, really practicing that, because I had ignored my own feelings and emotions. And I had also started to take on some things that I needed to release. I needed to release any shame and guilt around the divorce. I needed to release the fact that I thought I was a failure for having a divorce, because although the marriage failed, didn't mean I was a failure. Okay. So I needed to take that on. We tell ourselves these stories that just aren't true. We take an event and we start adding to it all these things that are just not true. And I really needed to get to a place where I could love myself enough to want a better life, want a better life for myself, want a better life for my kids, one that was true and authentic, filled with joy and laughter and excitement and all the things that were important to me and that brought me joy. So those are things I think we all need to just think about and start focusing on. And especially I'm speaking to my high functioning women. I'm speaking to all the women who are thinking that somehow this thing that has happened, this divorce, means something personal, and that it means that you are a failure or you are holding some guilt or shame over this. Please release that. Okay, this was an event that happened in your life. It was a chapter in a book. It is not the whole story. This is not define who you are or who you will be in the future. Okay. So please release that. Please start to love yourself again, and love yourself so much that you want to get to that next chapter, and you want to start designing that next chapter so that it can be true and authentic to you. Alignment took some time, and it also took some support. So I want you to know that alignment is not something that you need to try to do alone. You may have support from family or from friends. Some may have support from clergy or even a life coach. Just know it is possible, and it doesn't have to be done alone. The life that we want to design, we know requires alignment. What does alignment require? So we know we need to be aligned, mind, body, and spirit. But what does that alignment look like? Talked about support. Definitely need some support as we go through the process. But what else needs to happen? perhaps there needs to be an identity shift, especially if you were someone who was trying to be everything for everyone and take care of everyone, because that's exhausting and you need your energy for you to design your next life. Your next chapter needs to be full of energy, and so you can't spend it all on everyone else. It may require an identity shift. If you are a people pleaser, I want you to focus on pleasing yourself because you probably have been ignoring that for some time, and that's where you need to focus. If you were in a relationship where your partner kind of took up all the air in the room and had the big personality, and maybe you didn't speak up as much and you just went along all the time. So maybe you need to find your voice, because you're going to be the architect. You're designing this next chapter. So you've got to voice what your likes are, what your dislikes are, how you want this next chapter to look. And all that's going to require you to find your voice. One of the things that's so important is that you talked about self-love and how important self-love is. And that's because you will need to prioritize yourself in this process. You will need to prioritize your well-being. And that is your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. That needs to be in the front of your focus. That's where you need to spend your time. So those are all the things that we need to bring forward with us and things that we're going to need to have in order to get alignment. And there's also some things we need to release. We need to release and let go. And that's guilt. We're not going to bring guilt with us. We're not going to bring shame with us. We're not going to bring negative energy with us. And we also may need to let go of some people. Because if we are in communities or surrounded by people who are negative or who want to put guilt and shame on you, again, we can let them stay. They don't need to come with you. So I wanted you to think about this. If you think about, you go into your closet and you're just doing an inventory of what's in your closet, what's going to stay, what's going to go. We're going to do the same thing in your life. If you have something in your closet that when you put it on, you don't feel great, you don't feel beautiful, you don't feel sexy, you feel ugh, or just you don't like the way it makes you look and the way and how it makes you feel, do not bring that into your next chapter. That stays. And if that happens to be a conversation that you have with a certain friend or an acquaintance or even a family member, if they are not building you up and positive and someone who is supporting you on this journey, do not bring them into your next chapter. This next chapter that you are designing is by invitation only. So do not invite them in if they are not going to be beneficial, helpful, and supportive of your next chapter. Remember, only people who fill you up. If people are draining your energy or causing chaos instead of calm, we don't bring them forward. They do not receive an invitation. Thank you, but they are not going to be coming forward with you to your next chapter. Thank you for the lessons that you taught me, but let them stay in your last chapter, because this chapter is by invitation only, and they don't get an invite. Now that you are aware of the in-between season, you are aware of what is required for alignment, and you're aware of the option to design your next chapter. Now that you have all of this information, now you have some decisions to make. You can continue to live by default, where you are functioning, you are going through the motions, where you have misalignment between how you looked and act, which is great on the outside, and how you feel, which is crappy or unsettled on the inside. You can either choose to stay there living by default, or you can choose to start living by design, where you create a life you love that only includes people, places, and things that you invite in. A life that is true to who you are at your core, and where you feel peace and calm and joy, where you are no longer the victim, where things happen to you, but you are showing up as the victor because you know deep down things are happening for you. If you're sitting in that quiet house right now and you've decided that you want to design your next chapter, I'd be happy to explore what that could look like for you. And I want you to have a blueprint. I've created the Phoenix Reset, a reflection guide specifically for this in-between season. You can find the link in the show notes. It's your first tool for moving from default to design. And if this episode helped you, please take a moment to leave a review and share it with someone who might need it. Until next time, remember, this is your season to rise.